So, what does it take to challenge one of the biggest products in tech? Well, this is the story of how a team of less than 10 people, led by a 24-year-old, did exactly that. It is a classic David versus Goliath story, but for the age of AI. And believe me, it all started with a really radical idea.
And this quote right here, this gets to the absolute heart of their ambition. See, they weren't just thinking about making coding, 10% faster. Nope. They were imagining a future where AI pretty much automates everything, completely changing the game for how software gets built. This vision, it's the key to understanding every single decision they made from this point forward.
Okay, so let's start with that vision. It was radically bold, right? Because it just flew in the face of making small, safe improvements. But an idea this big doesn't just pop out of nowhere. It's usually built on a long journey of tinkering, failing, and learning.
Yeah, this wasn't some sudden flash of inspiration. It was something that was built up over a decade of just relentless building and experimentation, starting all the way back when the founder was just a kid.
And that brings us to the founder himself, Michael Tro-el. Now, his story doesn't kick off in some fancy research lab or a huge tech company. It starts in middle school with this simple, really powerful drive to just build stuff.
Just look at this timeline. You can see a clear pattern here. It all starts at middle school, getting inspired by Paul Graham's essays. Then he tries to build a mobile game. His brother quits, but he just keeps going. In high school, he's not just doing homework. He's building an app to cheat at Flappy Bird and teaching himself AI to make a robotic dog. And what's just wild is that by 17, he's writing his own neural network from scratch. Not because he was trying to be a genius, but because he literally didn't know the standard tools even existed. It's the perfect example of learning by just relentlessly doing.
So that drive to build carries him all the way through MIT and then right into his own startup, AnySphere. He and his co-founders, they had all the talent and ambition you could possibly ask for. But as they were about to learn the hard way, that's not always enough.
This next phase is something a lot of founders go through but almost never talk about. They call it the startup desert. And for months, the AnySphere team was completely lost in it, building things that absolutely no one wanted.
And look, these weren't simple little ideas. They took a swing at an AI co-pilot for complex CAD software, thinking it was a niche nobody was paying attention to. They also built this super secure encrypted messaging system. Both were technically really impressive and took a ton of effort.
So for 6 straight months, they were in the trenches. Scraping data, training models, hacking together solutions. They did all the hard work you're supposed to do. And then it was launch day.
And the result? 0. A big, fat 0. After 6 months of grinding, they had absolutely 0 users. Talk about a brutal, humbling reality check.
It was right there, at their absolute lowest point, that they made a decision that looked, well, completely insane from the outside. They decided to pivot and run straight at one of the most competitive markets you can imagine, a space completely dominated by a tech giant. This quote tells you everything about their mindset. This move wasn't born from arrogance, it came from pure desperation. After failing with their safe ideas, they figured, what the heck, we might as well work on the one thing we're truly passionate about, which was the future of coding itself. That desperation gave them the freedom to finally be bold.
And the competition was no joke. Their new Goliath was GitHub Copilot, a product already pulling in over $100 million a year. It was the established, undisputed king of the hill. Honestly, most people thought that game was already over.
But this slide explains exactly why they saw an opening. See, Copilot was basically playing checkers, making today's workflow a little bit better. Cursor wanted to play chess. They were aiming for that radical vision of full automation. They weren't just in a different lane, they were driving on a completely different highway.
So with this new conviction, they just started building. All those tough lessons from their months wandering the startup desert were now channeled into this one single audacious bet, creating Cursor. At first, they actually tried to build a new editor completely from scratch. That lasted about 3 months, and until they just hit a wall. They realized trying to replicate a massive 12-year-old project like VS Code was just impossible. So they made a brilliant strategic move. Instead of reinventing the wheel, they would fork VS Code. This let them build on top of a rock-solid foundation and pour 100% of their energy into the one thing that mattered, their unique AI features. For the rest of 2023, the team went into what they called monk mode. They just shut out all the noise, ignored all the fancy marketing and growth hacks, and did one thing and one thing only: make the product better, every single day. And you know what? It worked. The product got so good that growth just happened on its own, spreading like wildfire through pure word of mouth.
And if you want to see the results of that focus, look no further. Inside Y Combinator, which is one of the most elite startup communities in the world, adoption went from a tiny little sliver in 2023 to an unbelievable 80% just 1 year later. That is not marketing. That's a product that's just so good it sells itself.
And probably the most incredible part of that insane viral growth, the team that built it all was fewer than 10 people. It's just a powerful reminder of what a small, super-focused team can actually accomplish.
So what does Tro-el see coming next? Well, he doesn't think programmers are going to vanish overnight. Instead, he talks about this long, messy middle, where developers are going to be working side by side with AI. The AI won't just be a tool, It'll become a collaborator, basically an advanced colleague that helps you build.
So after all that, what are the big lessons from this journey? For Tro-el, it really boils down to a few core ideas. He thinks coding is a fundamental skill, kind of like math. But the real meta skill, the most important one, is learning how to learn. And at the end of the day, his advice is simple. Work on stuff you're genuinely interested in, and do it with people you deeply, truly respect. According to him, that's the real recipe for success.
This whole story really leaves us with a huge question for our own future. If software is changing this fast, what skills even matter anymore? Tro-el's journey seems to suggest the answer isn't a specific programming language. It's things like curiosity, persistence, and just the raw ability to learn. So the real question is, how are you getting ready for that future?